In this lesson, we'll continue working on the setup of our character's arms. So we have our shoulder control set up for our left arm. Okay, we have our shoulder moving nice, and we have our IK handle now in place. What we can do from here is make sure that that IK handle is going to be under the IK group. So with it selected, we'll go to our IK's group and just parent it where it needs to go. Great. Now, now that we do have the arm moving, of course there are a few things that we need to do. For one, besides making controls, okay, we do need to make sure that this elbow is going to follow the arm as we need it to. So in order to fix this elbow or to connect it to our rig, if we hit up arrow, we can see that we get to its group. And again, it's just a regular group with its pivot aligned right where the root joint of this bone chain is. Nothing much to that. So once we have the elbow, we're going to want that to be found in our outliner so we can parent constrain it to the arm. So let's go ahead and work on doing that. Here's our arm that we want it to be controlled by. We'll select that and we'll control click our group for the left elbow. Careful which one you're selecting. But once you have selected that, we can go now to constrain and do a parent constraint. So watch what we're going to be able to get as we move our IK handle. Notice, okay, it's kind of moving like the elbow should, only what's wrong? Well, it's pointed outward. Shouldn't the elbow be pointing more outward straight on rather than at this angle that it's at now? So how are we going to set that up for it to function properly? Well, what we need to do is set up another expression that is going to tie the rotation Y of this elbow. Okay, it's Y rotation. Oh, there we go. Let's select the Y and move that around. So it's going to tie that Y rotation to the elbow joint, okay, with a little change in the expression so that the elbow will move relative. So let's go ahead and set that up. With the rotate Y selected, we can right click and we go to our editors and go to expression editor so we can get right to it. We can call this the elbow relative expression. There we go, relative. Alright, now with it named, we can copy this line because we know we want to have it controlled. We want its rotate Y to be controlled, so we'll paste that in. And we'll put equals to, and what's it going to be equal to again? Well, that's going to be our elbow. Okay, and it's going to be controlled by the rotation Y of the elbow, but not by a direct connection, or we won't get the right movement that we're looking for out of the elbow. We're actually, in order for it to move relative, going to want it to move half as much as our elbow does. So let's go ahead and type that in. So after equals to, we'll type in bn underscore L underscore elbow 01 dot ry for the rotate Y times half of its motion. So 0.5, we'll put our semicolon and we'll put create. So now a connection has been established, and if we were to, let's say, close out our expression editor and move our IK handle again, notice what we get. As we move it around, notice the elbow bone is moving just as it needs to, pointing outward just as it needs to. No matter where we move our IK handle, it will move as we'd like it to. So that is how we set up the elbow preserve bone. Great. So now that that has been done, we have our shoulder in, we have our IK, and it's going where it needs to go. Our elbow's looking good. What's going to be our next task is going to be to work on creating some more controls. Okay, and if we wanted to, or what we'll do is after the left arm, we can just go ahead and apply what we did to the right to finish that off. But let's go ahead and continue on finishing up the left arm, at least for the major controls, before we get to the right. So what I like to do for the arm control, just being a little bit more unique, is to go to create, go to polygons, and make a platonic solid. Go ahead and create that. Okay, now we won't use this shape. What we're going to be doing is basically drawing or outlining the shape that we're about to see. So with that created, we can switch this, its solid type, to octahedron. Okay, I think that would make a pretty cool looking arm control. So we now need to outline it. We can go to create, and we go to our CV curve tool, making sure again it's set to linear. and we'll just vert snap it. So starting from the top, we can hold V, vert snap, go down to the bottom, vert snap, just outlining it. And again, once you're done drawing this out, you could apply it to your shelf after you get the script that you need from the script editor. Okay, and again, we do teach that in the quad kit. Alright, so we snap that, and we do want to make sure that we get its horizontal edges as well, so we don't leave those out. Okay, that should be the last. So once we've managed to do that, we can hit enter, select the object, delete it, and now we have our control. So let's enter pivot, and let's move it right to the wrist, right where our IK handle is. We'll scale it down to a good size. Go back to our channel box, and let's see, I think that's a pretty good size for it. So we can now freeze its transformations, so clean it up. And let's give it a name. We could call it CC underscore L underscore arm 01. Nothing much to that. So we have our arm control in place, and if we wanted to, we can now duplicate it and move it over to the left side or the right side, just so that it's over there, and then freeze its transformations, clean it up, and we will go ahead and rename it. Okay, just to have that over there. Alright. Now, how about for an elbow control? We're going to want to use that, or we're going to want a control for that, that is, so we can go to our text, and we'll just make an E, similar to how we made a K for the knee. We'll hit create. With it selected, ungroup once, ungroup twice, center its pivot, and before we snap it to the elbow, let's go ahead and snap it right there to the knee. The only reason why is I just like to keep everything for the most part just lined up in the rig, so like to at least match up the elbow control similar to the size of what we have for our knee, just to keep everything looking nice and uniform. So with the knee now sized the way we like it to, let's go ahead and move it right to our elbow. Okay, or the elbow, that is, with that sized up. Okay, so once we have it positioned, we can freeze its transformations to clean it up. And since we left the knee control right where we have the knee, we could just, again, to keep everything looking clean, keep the elbow control right where the character's elbow is, aligned with the actual elbow bone. So once that's there, we'll give it a name, CC underscore L underscore elbow 01. Okay, now that's there, duplicate it, and move it over to the actual elbow bone, so it'll be aligned where it needs to be. Great, freeze its transformations, give it a new name, call this 01 and R for right side. Okay, so our controls are pretty much coming along. Let's say we go ahead and make one more control. This time, this is going to be for our fingers. I don't like to put the finger controls where our arm control is, simply because that gives us a lot of attributes on there. I like to keep a separate control, especially when it comes to tweaking the fingers in the graph editor. It'd be so much nicer to just get to the keys for the fingers without having to worry about the keys for the actual arm. So for this, let's go back to create. We'll go to create text, and let's just use an F for fingers and hit create. Again, we ungroup once, ungroup twice, center its pivot, and we can move it right where the left arm is. Once that's there, we can scale it out a bit. Okay, it doesn't need to be matched up with the elbow at all. That'll be fine. We can scale it down some more and use its vert. Since we like where the pivot is, we'll just bring it up and just freeze its transformations to clean it up. We can give it a name, call it CC underscore L underscore fingers. And we will set up a switch so we can turn on and off this control so it doesn't get in the way when we're animating. I think if we wanted to, maybe we could even scale this down a little bit more, just so that it's not so large, and even possibly bring it down in the Y. Okay, so once it's where we like it to be, of course we duplicate it, bring it over to the right side, freeze its transformations, and switch its name around. So that's L to R and 2 to 1. Okay, so we have all of these controls. Let's say we go ahead and make sure that they'll be where we'd like them to be. So for our fingers, that's going to be parented right underneath our arm, so we can go ahead and do that. So we'll do that for the right side too. Okay, now that that's done, we can make sure that these controls are going to be right underneath our control curve group. So we can close out our joints over here. So we could just get to our control objects, maybe close out anything else, our center of gravity. Okay, so we have our left arm, right arm, elbow, elbow. We'll select those and then control click our control objects and make sure they're resting right underneath. Alright, great. And of course, to finish it off, let's go ahead for now for this lesson and color code everything before we go ahead and stop and move on to the next lesson where we'll continue with our connections. So we'll go to enable overrides and let's say we give it a color of blue. We'll go to our elbow and also give that a color of blue. Okay, for our right side, we will use that same red color and do the same for the elbow. Great. Okay, well, that again wraps up this lesson. We have our controls in place, and in the next lesson we'll continue on the setup of our arms.